welcome to the lecture series on Introduction to Indian Philosophy. In this lecture, I will discuss with you the Sankhya concept of Purusha, which is the conscious principle. In my previous lecture, I told you about the Sankhya view that Prakriti is the cause of the whole universe, and that the three gunas, namely Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, are the constituent factors that make up the Prakriti. Originally, they are in the state of equilibrium, in the sense that they are not recognized as three separate constituents. But when this original equilibrium is disturbed, the whole process of evolution or creation takes place. And you already know that this disturbance is actually the breaking up of the homogeneity of the three gunas. There is a struggle that ensues in which each guna loses its original position and gets entangled in each other. Each one tries to dominate the others. Now, one question that comes to mind at this point is how this disturbance in the equilibrium takes place. The Sankhya answer to this question is remarkably interesting. In my previous lecture, I also mentioned that Sankhya is a dualistic school. They accept Prakriti or the unconscious principle as the ultimate reality, which of course gives the naturalistic explanation of the world. But hold on, Prakriti is not all of reality. There is Purusha, or the conscious principle, which stands opposed to it and which prevents this theory of evolution to be completely naturalistic. We know the world of matter because of Purusha, the conscious principle, as it is the consciousness which manifests the physical world. We should not understand Purusha as a substance possessing the attribute of consciousness. Purusha is pure consciousness itself. It is not to be identified as the body, the senses, the brain, the mind, the ego or the intellect. It is the self, the spirit, the subject, the knower. It is self-illumined, unchanging, uncaused, all-pervading, eternal reality. It is due to ignorance that the Purusha identifies itself as the body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, and gets caught up in the endless series of change, and then justifiably so feels itself to be the subject of pain and pleasure, when in fact whatever is subjected to birth, change, death and decay belongs to Prakriti or its evolutes, but not to Purusha. Have a look at the 19th verse of the Sankhya Karika. Tasmat cha viparaya sat siddham sakshitvam asya purushasya kaivalyam madhyastyam drishtritvam akartri bhava cha, which may be translated as, and from that contrast it is established that the spirit, that is Purusha, is the pure witness. He is solitary, neutral, spectator and non-agent. Now it is time to understand the arguments the Sankhya system offers to prove the existence of Purusha. They offer 5 arguments which have been enunciated in verse 17 of the Sankhya Karika. And the verse is Sanghat pararthtvāt trigunadi viparayat adhishthanat Purushah asti bhoktri bhavat kaivalyartham pravrittescha. which may be translated as, because an assemblage of things is for the sake of another, because the opposite of the three modes and the rest must exist, because there must be a superintending power, because there must be a nature that enjoys, and because of the existence of active exertion for the sake of abstraction or isolation from material contact, therefore soul exists. So let us start with the first argument, Sanghat Pararthtvat, which may be stated as, all the objects of the world are meant to be utilized by and for someone other than themselves. All things that exist serve simply as the means for the ends of other beings. A chair is not made for the chair itself, nor is a house made for the house itself. Therefore, there must be something quite different and distinct from such objects. As you can observe, this argument is teleological, as it proves that evolution is purposive. Now, the physical world, which is an assemblage of 5 elements, cannot enjoy its own existence. Also, one physical object cannot be utilized or enjoyed by another physical object. We need to admit something which is essentially different, for whose sake the enjoyable body, world of objects has evolved or has been created. And it is only commonsensical to regard that the body, the mind, the intellect, the material world has been produced to serve the purpose of the Purusha. Now the second argument is Trigunadi Viparayat, which may be formulated as, Prakriti is unconscious and is the material cause of all objects. It is the balance of the gunas of which all the objects of the world are composed. Prakriti is thus the potential or essence of all pain, pleasure and neutral states. It cannot therefore be the enjoyer of itself, just as even the smartest of men cannot sit on his own shoulders. The proprietor or utilizer of all worldly objects must consequently be a conscious being who does not possess the 3 gunas and who is completely different from them in both their balanced and heterogeneous states. That transcendent reality is Purusha. This is a logical argument. Let us understand why. Prakriti and therefore the world and the objects are composed of the 3 gunas, and these 3 gunas are the source of pleasure, pain and indifference. Therefore, it is only logical to presuppose the existence of a sentient being who is essentially different from them and is also a witness of these gunas in the sense that he feels the pleasure, the pain or indifference that is the result of them. That sentient being is not matter, for the matter or the unconscious cannot feel or think. It is Purusha indeed. Now the third argument. It is Adhishthanat, which may be expressed as, all objects of the external world, including the mind, senses and intellect, are in themselves unconscious. They cannot function without guidance from some intelligent principle. They must be controlled and directed by the intelligent principle in order to achieve anything or realize any end. That conscious self who guides the operation of Prakriti and its manifestations is Purusha. This is the ontological argument. We must understand that Adhishthanat comes from the word Adhishthan, which means basis or foundation or control or authority. So, the term Adhishthanat suggests that there must be a controlling force or the foundation upon which the physical world with its experiences depends. Now, Prakriti being unconscious cannot be that controller. A chunk of clay cannot by itself get onto the wheel, and the wheel on its own cannot rotate. Also, the clay cannot take a specific shape unless a potter puts the clay onto the wheel, rotates the wheel, and gives a specific shape to the clay. Now, Gaudapad also in his translation of the Karika says that just as a charioteer guides a chariot, so does the Purusha guides the Prakriti. Now, the fourth argument, it is Bhoktri Bhavat, and it may be stated as non-intelligent Prakriti and all its evolutes, which are by nature pleasurable, painful, or neutral, have no meaning if they are not experienced by some intelligent force. That experience is Purusha. Now, this argument is ethical. How? Let us see. The products of Prakriti are bhogya, that is, they are to be enjoyed or experienced. As we know, the physical objects being composed of the three gunas are capable of producing either pleasure, pain, or indifference. The unconscious, unintelligent Prakriti cannot be the bhokta or the enjoyer of itself. Purusha or a conscious principle as a bhokta is required to enjoy and experience Prakriti and its evolutes. You may find this argument somewhat similar to the first one, but let me clarify that the first argument is about utility or purposiveness, and this one is about ownership. Now, the fifth and the last argument, it is Kaivalyartham pravritteha, which may be formulated as every human being wants to attain liberation and be free from pain and misery. But whatever is derived from Prakriti brings pain and misery. If there is nothing apart from Prakriti and its evolutes, then liberation is not attainable. Also, if there is only Prakriti, then the concept of liberation and the will to liberate or to be liberated, which is found in all human beings in the sayings of sages and in the scriptures, would be meaningless. Therefore, there must be some conscious principle that strives for liberation. That principle is the self, the Purusha. Now, this is an interesting argument. By the way, this argument is mystical, or you may even call it religious. The intense longing in every human being for a higher life where there is no suffering indicates the possibility of actually attaining it. By higher life or a life without suffering means a condition of pure isolation or abstraction from matter. But it can be made possible when there is no material contact. The agent or the seeker of Kaivalya must therefore set himself free from matter, and that is possible only if he is not of the nature of matter. So, the seeker of liberation is the conscious Purusha. So, the Sankhya accept Purusha as the original agent who gives the first stimulus so that the whole process of evolution starts. And with regard to the whole physical objective world, Purusha is the experiencer. He is the subject whose nature is absolutely different from Prakriti. However, the experiencer sometimes also becomes the object of his own experiences. For example, he experiences happiness on the completion of some activity. So, in saying I am happy, the term I in his statement becomes the object of his experience of happiness. So, you can see how the dualistic thesis comes about on the investigation of the things that appear in nature. One of the two realities is worked out from the physical world as its source or its first cause. The second reality is confirmed from the physical world to its aim or its final cause. The physical world is produced from a principle which is similar to it in its nature, but it serves and promotes the ends of another which is completely different from it. Anyway, let us move ahead now. If you remember in my introductory lecture on Sankhya, I told you that Shankaracharya in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras has remarked that the system of Kapila is in opposition to the Vedas and with the teachings of Manu, which are in consonance with the Vedas, because the system of Kapila does not only posit an independent Prakriti, but it also postulates manifoldness of souls. Kapila gives a pluralistic concept of selves. So let us see what arguments there are to support the plurality of Purushas in the Sankhya Karika. Have a look at the verse 18, which is Janana Marana Karananam Pratiniyamat Ayugpat Pravrittescha Purusha Bahutvam Siddham Traigunya Viparyayat Cha Eva, which may be translated as from the separate allotment of birth, death, and the organs, from the diversity of occupations at the same time, and also from the different conditions or modifications of the three modes, it is proved that there is a plurality of souls. Now let us discuss these three arguments one by one. The first one is Janana Marana Karananam Pratiniyamat, and this may be expressed as, if there were only one self related to all bodies, then when only one individual died, all individuals would simultaneously die. But this does not happen. The birth or death of one individual does not cause all other individuals to be born or to die. Blindness or deafness in one man does not imply the same for all men. Therefore, there must be a plurality of selves. This is a very clear argument. It says, if there were just one Purusha, then it would enter into bodies and leave them at the same time. However, birth, death, body, organs, they are all allotted to the self in accordance with the karmas performed in the previous life. The defects in the bodies like blindness or deafness are traced back to the past karmas. Moreover, the self is neither born nor does it die. These changes happen only when the self comes in contact with the body. So, different bodies, different selves, different karmas, and different results. And this can make sense only if there is plurality of Purushas. Now let us understand the second argument, which is ayugpat pravrittescha. This argument suggests if there were only one self pervading all beings, then if one person were active, all the selves would be active. If one were sleeping, then all would sleep. But this does not happen. There is therefore not one self but many selves. Now, different human beings have different orientations. Also, the actions that two people perform are not the same. Moreover, people perform different actions at different times. And this is possible only when there is plurality of Purushas. Now the last argument, and it is Traigunya Viparyayat, which suggests that human beings are different from God and from animal and vegetable life as well. But this distinction could not be true if God, human beings, animals, birds, insects and plants all possessed the same self. Therefore, there must be a plurality of selves that are eternal and intelligent. Different beings are affected differently by the three gunas. Some beings have more affinity with sattva, so they are of a divine nature. Some have more affinity with rajas, so they are more aggressive. Similarly, some have more affinity with tamas and so they are inert. Each Purusha has a distinct personality depending on the preponderance of the three gunas, and this explains the plurality of Purushas. If you noticed, I have still not answered the question which led me to introduce you to the Sankhya concept of Purusha. And that was how the disturbance in the equilibrium of the three gunas takes place. Actually, this question is about the role of Purusha in the process of evolution or creation. Let us understand one thing, which perhaps you may have understood by now, that in the production of the pot, for example, there is no role of the person who in the future would use, experience or enjoy the pot. However, the person is important because without such a possible future, there would have been no production. Likewise, this whole process of creation or evolution is a material, physical phenomena. A phenomenon that takes place within matter itself. But the existence of Purusha is crucial. I guess I will take up this question in the next lecture. Bye for now.